Okay, last time we went over this idea of the original event that caused the rupture in your identity and generated this belief that something was wrong with you, your character, your wiring, and how that led you to create a feel-good persona. I used myself and my story as an example in detail. So if you haven't listened to it, I suggest that you do in order to get a good handle on this idea of the schism and the misdiagnosis and how criticism and fear and envy entered into the picture and ultimately knocked you out of alignment of who you were always meant to become and who you are at the core. In this episode, we're going to go over some feel-good personas that I came up with and hoping that one of them sounds like you. And if not, tell me whose yours is in the comments below. And just another quick note on archetypes. We're going to dig way deeper into this whole concept of these archetypes in chapter 3. I'm also going to do a mini series on each archetype. And hear me on this. This isn't to put you into a box of what is your archetype, the cheerleader, the warrior, the savage, the ghost, whatever. It's not to put you into this box. It's to give you really profound self-awareness of the racket that you're running and this personality that you're performing. It is not you. But the more information I can give you, the more you'll be able to see when you run this racket in your life. So that's a note on archetypes. We're also going to talk about how that core wiring in you, which isn't a persona, which isn't an archetype or a character that you're playing, but real wiring that was put into you before you were even formed. We want to redeem that. Not so that you can be the best of yourself, but so that you can be the truest version of yourself. Okay. From there, from the feel-good archetypes and feel-good personas that we're going to unearth in this particular episode, we're going to finish up the entire concept of the fall. It's this one big giant package. And all of this, again, isn't to identify a persona you created so we can put you in a bucket. It's so that you can break out of that bucket once and for all, take off the mask, and become who you were designed to be all along. So let's dig in. You know, I can only relate to creating the cheerleader because that's who I developed and that's who I created. So I've done some work into some alternative feel-good personas or archetypes, and we're going to go through that together now. So I'm going to put the workbook aside and just kind of read a little bit of some of these feel-good personas and see if any of these sound like you, okay? If you're watching this on YouTube, put your feel-good once you hear it or it resonates with you, or if you come up with a different persona, there's another persona that you think names you more appropriately, I want you to put that below. So here are some feel-good personas who have the goal to dominate pain before it can dominate them, okay? The winner. The winner. You decided to be a winner. And that winner is hyperachiever, success obsessed, always wants to be the best, doesn't feel or fear failure, just refuses to even entertain it. Just failure is not an option. They will win, the winner will win at all costs to outrun a sense of inner unworthiness. That's the winner. If your goal is to dominate pain before it can dominate you, you might also be the savage. The savage. And the savage is ruthless, blunt, or anti-fragile. We've heard that word a lot in the last couple of years. The savage turns emotional walls into spiked armor. So they just become, whoosh, they're going to hurt you, man. They're going to hurt you. They're pridefully independent, and they use that independence and they see that as a strength. That's the savage. And again, if you like, let's say you feel like, oh yeah, I'm the savage, that resonates with me. My goal is to dominate pain before it can dominate me. But I didn't say something, or I didn't recognize something in the savage that really maps to this persona that you created. Please let me know. We're in this together. We're in this together. There's this, I'm going to take a quick aside. There's this guy named Donald Miller, and he has this whole system about story brand. He calls it story branding. And this idea of being the story brand is to use Hollywood storytelling, or the methodology of storytelling, to help people brand what it is that they're trying to put out into the world. So as I began wanting to put this out in the world for you, I took that course and I loved it. Listen, I love it. I spent a little bit of time in Hollywood. I know a little bit about it. I've also worked in film and TV and bringing really amazing creative works to the public market. So I'm in love with story. But he said something that I want to identify. He said that people who come to this journey, so if you're coming to this journey and you're looking at me, and trying to define who I am in this journey, what he talks about, what Donald Miller talks about, is to be the guide for people. And I just want to tell you, I am a fellow sojourner. I am a guide for you in as much as I've created a framework based on the framework that I went through in the From the Core memoir that really helped me heal how I functioned in life. So to that extent, I can guide you through the framework, but I am right there in the mix with you. I am shoulder to shoulder working this out with you. So I just want to be clear about that. So if you find that you are the savage, but I didn't name something that that the savage persona has, please drop that in the comments below. Okay. For those who have the goal to dominate pain before it can dominate them, here's another archetype for you to consider: the protector. Always on guard, always saving others. They look noble to the outside eye, but they're driven by, no one will ever hurt me or mine again. I am going to put up walls. I'm going to go to the mattresses. I'm going to do whatever's required. You hurt them, I hurt you. That's how that goes. I'm the protector. The protector often becomes controlling and even domineering. Okay, those are 3 archetypes I came up with for those who dominate this idea of pain before it can dominate them. Okay, here's another feel-good resolve persona. So this is a group whose goal it is to outrun pain before it catches up to them. So if you want to outrun pain before it catches up to you, you might be the chameleon. The chameleon. The chameleon adapts to every room, every culture, every expectation. Their identity is fluid. And again, this identity is not rooted in freedom, just like, hey, I am everything to everyone. It is rooted in fear. They are always moving. They are always in the room, but they are never known. That is the chameleon. You might be the dreamer if you're trying to outrun pain before it catches up. You escape into fantasy, creativity, idealism. You are holding this idea of toxic positivity. You know those people, man. Everything's always great, even when it's not. They are toxic in their positivity. The other thing about the dreamer is they avoid pain by imagining a better world, but never living in this one. That's the dreamer. Head in the clouds. You know those people. I know those people. We all know those people. We all kind of laugh at those people like, oh, look, he's such a dreamer. She's such a dreamer. But the reality is you're witnessing a fear-based persona. That is someone's feel-good resolve, because if they're dreaming, they're never there. The other feel-good resolve persona, whose goal is to outrun pain before it catches up to them, might be the nomad, perpetually in transition, different jobs, different cities, different relationships, different names. I know a woman who I actually really admire. She's pretty phenomenal. But every time I talk to her, she has a different first name. She goes by a totally different name. It's all variations of her name, but it's like, yeah, who are you? Like, who am I talking? Who am I talking to now? You know? So always a different name, perpetually in transition, believes the next place will finally be the safe place. Uses motion to mask rootlessness. Now, I want to say something really quick. When you develop these personas, you kind of have a default persona or a core persona. But if you're saying, yeah, you know, that sounds like me, that sounds like something I do, there is a difference between behaviors and personas. And we're going to get into that. In this chapter, you're not going to have to wait long. We're going to get into that. But you developed a certain persona, a specific persona. That doesn't mean that you don't execute some of these behaviors. So my particular persona is the cheerleader, but I'm also known to be perpetually in transition. I've lived in more cities than I can count. I have always been on the move. And a lot of that was in search of outrunning, or rather attempting to outrun pain. So don't feel locked into these personas. If you hear something that resonates with you, don't feel like, ooh, this is my archetype, therefore I can only be this person, or it doesn't fit. No, that's not how it goes. Just identify what is most like you, what is not you, what is most like the persona that you created. Okay. We're going to move on. We're going to move on to the people whose goal, the archetypes whose goal it is to disappear before the pain notices them. If that sounds like the persona that you developed, you might be the observer. I know these people in meetings, they sit back, they kind of have their arms crossed. They don't say much, but they just observe everything. They have opinions about everything, but they're not really in the arena. These are detached, intellectual, and analytical people. They study people, but they never engage. They use knowledge as armor. That is the observer. A persona whose goal is to disappear before pain notices them might also be the ghost. They're barely present. They're quiet, they're invisible in groups, they know how to exist without drawing attention, they kind of shrink in order to survive. That is the ghost. There but not there. A person whose goal it is, or a persona whose goal it is to disappear before pain notices them, might also be the Stoic. These people kind of seem super strong and super calm, but they're really actually emotionless. They are unshakable and calm under pressure, and they're praised for their control, but they are internally disassociated. They feel nothing, so they won't feel everything. These are personas whose goal it is to disappear before pain notices them. And then there are people like the personas that I developed. The goal of the cheerleader was to appease pain before it lashed out. It is proactive. The cheerleader smiles as survival. Happy equaled safe. The cheerleader is never a burden and always agreeable. The cheerleader supports others and self-abandons. That is the cheerleader. You might also be or have developed the persona of the helper, where you serve endlessly, you overfunction, you gain worth by being needed. You never rest. You say to yourself, if I stop, I disappear. So you're always doing things for others. You might have developed the persona of the peacemaker, always mediating, smoothing things over. This persona, I can see this persona being developed in an environment that was extremely contentious, where people were always fighting. And that probably felt super unsafe. And so if you developed a persona of the peacemaker, I can see that. I mean, can't you just see that happening? Of course, you just want to smooth things over. You also avoided all conflict yourself. You never engaged in conflict. You always prioritized harmony over truth. And consequently, you cannot hold tension without panicking. That persona, all of these personas are survival-based personas. They're trying to dissolve pain. And so when conflict arises, panic wells up as well. Another feel-good resolve persona is the hostess. The hostess. Hospitality as performance. Everyone's welcome except you. You achieve safety by staying busy, looking gracious, keeping through control through curation. You're just going to create the most amazing environment where everyone's welcome, where you're hustling and hustling, making sure everyone has what they need and you don't have what you need. But you feel like you'll be safe, you'll gain pleasure if you create this beautiful performance in which you're the hostess. It's a performance. The hostess is a character. Another feel-good resolve persona could be the muse. You become the source of inspiration or delight for others. Oh, isn't that amazing? You become the embodiment of beauty, insight, charm, or sex appeal in order to maintain value. That can be mistaken as empowerment or being empowered, but it's actually a persona that's starving for attention and validation. The muse. Here's the deal. Each of these feel-good personas is a way of saying, I can't live like this, so I'm going to become someone who can. Who I actually am at the core can't live like this. Cordelia, core, me, I can't live like this. I can't sit against this door and experience this rejection and live in an environment that's rejecting me. I can't carry this burden of being this bad girl, this abnormal bad person. So I'm going to create someone who can handle this whole situation. And she's the good girl. She's the cheerleader. But the cost of creating a persona is I lost my actual self, the one I was created to be before my time on earth even began. That's the cost of developing these personas. We're going to dive back into the workbook, but I want you to take a minute. If you've just been listening as we've been going through this, take a minute to identify the persona you created out of your feel-good resolve. What was the name of the persona you created? If you gave your persona a name, what would it be? And what are the key characteristics of the persona you created? So again, the cheerleader was always happy, always cheerful, always friendly, always smiley, always fun, never a burden. That was me. Woohoo! If you were to look at, I actually was a cheerleader just to live out that persona to its fullest. But if you look at some of my old yearbooks, junior high, high school, when I was actually a cheerleader, I mean, man, I had the biggest smile. In fact, I got my license once and, the person took the picture, and after they took the picture, they see the camera, you don't see the camera. And so she looked at my picture in the camera and she actually said to me, do you want to maybe smile a little bit less? Because the cheerleader, man, is ear to ear, ear to ear. So that is where we are in the fall and the funk. This is all still a part of the fall. The fall, again, is that decrease in value that, you decided you were unworthy. You decided you were 50 cents on the dollar. That is a decrease in value and level and a sudden uncontrollable descent. When I sat outside that door, I landed at this idea of I'm a bad girl with a thud. It had been coming like an onrushing train, but once I sat outside that door, man, it was like, whoom. A trap door opened up underneath me and I fell inside. So once we have this schism in our identity, once we have this fall, this sudden descent into this basically chasm and this decrease in our value, that belief that we are not worthy, that, something is wrong with us, we have to create a storyline to stabilize the chaos. The environment is so chaotic, and we got to do something to bring order to this chaos. So once we know that something is wrong with me, that is actually, I want to read you something because I said this so well in the workbook. A story is a description of events and people that the writer or speaker has invented to entertain people. So you've now put on this whole show. The persona is the character of the show. That's the hero. The persona, the feel-good persona is the hero. They're going to save the day. They're going to save you from the pain. That's the hero of the story. The schism is the identity. I want to get this really into your bones. So we're gonna do this. We're just gonna read this together. Okay, this is on page 111. Very early in life, we learn the most powerful word of all, why. When we were children, the number one word we asked for at the very beginning of our life was why. That was the number one question, and often the first question. We ask why to gather information. We use that information to create understanding. From understanding, we build stories. And the most powerful story we tell is the story of who we say we are. I didn't know much when I crafted my story. I was only 7. I'd fallen out of a window, and I knew I felt sick most of the time. I knew no one could find anything wrong with me physically, and I also knew that it changed the way that people responded to me. They rejected, dismissed, and were mad at me. And that part I didn't understand so well. I didn't know why everyone was so mad at me. So when I asked myself the question, who am I decided something is wrong with me. That is the schism. The identity fracture in your value is something is wrong with me. That sits at the crack of the core of who you are, is the belief that something is wrong with you. Once I decided something was wrong with me, I needed to understand why. Here are some of the reasons I entertained. I am not worthy. I am not enough. I am broken. I am unlikable or unlovable. From this whole list, I decided I was broken and unlikable, and that was my identity. And that crafted the story of my life. The schism is something is wrong with you. The story answers the question, why? The purpose of the story is to stabilize the chaos. The character descends into the story to save you from being broken and unlikable, not worthy, not enough, so that you can create a different story and a different outcome in your life. Again, you likely crafted this story as a child. And if you want to know why, it's because children ask the word why in order to make the world coherent, in order to make it make sense. Children are, we talked about this before, please go back and listen if you haven't, but we talked about how once you start forming memory, you don't have this map of the world where you understand other people and their motivations. You don't. Children are egocentric by design. You are self-conscious. Everything goes back to you. So when the world is in chaos and you're wondering why, the natural deduction of a child is it's your fault. That is the natural deduction. A child would rather be the villain in a coherent story than live in a world of chaos with no answers. And that is like the stunning thing that comes out of all of this is the child's need is to develop stability in a world of chaos, not truth. You're not at that point searching for the truth of who you are or the truth of the circumstance. You are trying to just stabilize and bring order to chaos. You just want the world to stop spinning. And so the feel-good resolve creates a person that is the good girl, because who you are, the story of who you are is, I am not worthy, I am not enough, I am broken, I am unlikable, I am unlovable. And that becomes the story of your life. What was the story you told yourself? Man, this is heavy. It's heavy because we carry it around. It's like this burden. It's like this cement block that we carry around our neck. It's so weighted. It's not freedom. It's a shackling. It's a burden that you carry. Once you've created that story, it's this internal story, right? You've generated, I'm not worthy, I'm not enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not likable, I'm broken. Something is wrong with me. Crack. That's at the crack of the core of who you are. It's a schism in your identity. And in order for the story to, I want to say, make sense in a way, you need a symbol. You need something external. You need something that takes this internal meaning that you've generated and map it to the external environment so that you can make sense of it all, so that you integrate the internal and the external. And for me, that was this minted coin collection. This was the symbol. It wasn't just a metaphor. I'm 50 cents on the dollar. Everyone else was a full dollar. It was a manifestation of my belief in the actual tactile, visceral world. This symbolized me. This 50-cent piece was me in physical form. And it didn't just symbolize me. It wasn't just a symbol of me. It was the entire story. I was 50 cents on the dollar. Everyone else was a full dollar. I was 50 cents. Therefore, in order for me to be worthy of this full dollar mark, I had to make up for the difference. It was a visual gospel of lack. It was a visual gospel of lack. It represented the entire story. What is the symbol that represents your story? And listen, you're going to do this work. I really challenge you to do this work. Do it once. I want to say a couple things and all at the same time. Number one, do this work once. Once you understand the persona that you created, the storyline it generated, your feel-good resolve, why you felt pain, the moment that you had a fall in value and a sudden uncontrollable descent, and the event that triggered the fall in you. Once you understand that, you don't have to go back to this work again. This isn't this lifetime of excavating drama. You do it one time, but you got to do it thoroughly. You got to do it well. You got to dig deep. And if you don't know, if you're sitting here and you're doing this work right now, just let it kind of percolate. Let yourself sit in this conversation. Come back to it if you need to. Read other people's comments about personas that they developed, because you might spark with one of those. If you can't identify, if what I read doesn't feel like one of your personas and whatever, and then you read something and that sparks it in you, or ask people questions, whatever you need to do, man, do the work. Do the work. And if you don't know at this juncture what symbol you could have grasped onto, that is totally okay. And if you want to draft off the symbol that I identified, if you feel or have ever felt in your life like 50 cents on the dollar, and that sounds right to you, use it. Use it. We're going to use the conversation, 50 cent beliefs, 50-cent behavior, 50-cent thinking, all through this workbook. So don't worry. If you need to draft off of it, draft off it. Because here's the magic of that concept of full dollar. You have been trying to live whole as a whole being. You have been struggling desperately, valiantly, exhaustingly, constantly, just trying to feel whole. That's what you're doing in life. So, man, full dollar, here we come. So there is on page 116 and 117, I go through this whole foundational belief and the framework of the fall. What happened? What happened? The misdiagnosis. How did the response misdiagnose the truth? The fear. How were the circumstances scary and painful and no one could help you, or you perceived that no one could help you? What envy was generated? Who around you had a perceived advantage that you felt envious about? What criticism surfaced? How did people use what happened or what happened to you to malign you or your character? What feel-good resolve, what persona, what character, what hero did you develop that would save you from pain? Your persona was your salvation. What story did you decide to answer the question of what was wrong with you? And how did that identify you as the villain, the real you as the villain? What symbol did you identify that was also equally unworthy, unlikable, unlovable, broken, just like you, that you felt helped you understand why things were the way that they were? What object could you reach to viscerally in the tactile world to explain everything? That all is the fall. I want to say one quick thing about the symbol before we move on from this. The symbol, the 50 cents, the full dollar, is an object your soul reaches to explain your pain, anchor your identity, externalize your belief, and justify your behavior. That last point is so important because the fall is the belief, but the funk, when I call the fall and the funk, the fall is the belief, that descent in value, that uncontrollable thing that happened. And the funk is all the behaviors that bore out from that fall. But here's the thing, the symbol that you reached for allows you to justify your behavior. Well, of course I'm doing this. I'm 50 cents on the dollar. Of course I'm behaving this way. I'm just 50 cents. You justify it to yourself and you justify it to the world. The fallout of the fall is that you invented a story to survive your pain, not to tell the truth about who you are. Consequently, you stopped asking what is true and you started asking what will keep me safe. And once safety replaces truth, you don't just lose yourself. You begin performing in a life you were meant to live. Why is safety? Why does this replacement of truth and safety, why is this exchange so devastating? It's because it's the moment that your innocence as a child fractures and the world becomes enemy terrain. The entire world is different. And This is an axis shift. If your world revolves around an axis, you are now revolving around the axis of pursuing safety because the world is enemy terrain. This axis shift moves you from divine design and delight to a defensive posture. I remember a story, this is a while ago, I don't even remember where I heard it, but Barbara Streisand tells a story of she was in her house with a bunch of people, and I guess a child walked in the room. And if I remember the story right, the child was naked or in their diapers or something like that. Anyway, totally unaware of themselves, certainly felt no shame about being naked or half naked, and wandered into the room. And she talks about that delight and how that child just was so defenseless. Not that they were vulnerable, but that they didn't have that mask of defensiveness that we all have. Defending against things that we perceive as unsafe, terrain that we have identified as enemy territory. We are not unconscious and delighting in the world and curious. I mean, think about a child and how curious they are about everything, how the world is so fascinating to them, how the world receives them. I mean, man, a child walks in and generally it's just like the whole room opens up. The world focuses on that child and they're just like, oh, you're so precious. You don't have to do anything. You just exist and are precious. But the moment the fall happens in our life and we do not feel received and welcomed by the world anymore, the world becomes enemy terrain. And it results in the death of design, the design of who you were before you even came to life, and the death of delight. You are no longer delighted by the world. You are defensive against it. There was an innocence before the fall. The world was wide and wondrous and responded to you and laughed with you and received you, and your existence didn't need to be earned, it was welcomed. But the moment the shift happened, something occurred. It was a word or a laugh at your expense, or you got ignored, or you got dismissed, or you got rejected, or you told a story that nobody believed. You stated something that was true and it made people uncomfortable, and suddenly the entire atmosphere around you changed. And not just around you, toward you. You felt it in your body. I am too much. I am not enough. I am not safe here. And what happened next was the world was no longer an open field. It became a field of landmines, and your delight turned into a defense. Your exploration turned into strategy, because your strategy is now to stay alive, to stay safe. And your presence turned into a problem to solve, or a persona who was going to save you from pain. You stopped being a child and you started being a survivor. That is the real tragedy of the fall. It is not just that you got hurt. It is that you stopped believing the world could ever love who you really are. That is the origin of the funk. That is the hinge between the fall and the funk, the birth of the persona, the launch of the survival orbit. That is the thing that got you out of alignment with who you really are. So, on page 118 of the workbook, we go into safety. This is the beginning of the development of the funk. And I'm going to read you really quickly a blurb that I wrote in my original book. That was the real impact of the fall and the funk it created. It broke something in me physically. It broke something in me emotionally. And it broke something in my family too. It created a schism between my perceived identity and the truth of who I was, and it was a shared illusion. Cordelia's crazy had become a common refrain around my house. It was meant to be a joke, but of course it really wasn't. Hypochondriac, drama queen, high maintenance, just so sensitive, delivered with an eye roll. These were all words and phrases meant to correct what was seen as abhorrent behavior, or at the very least, call me out for being different. Sometimes all I had to do was show up on the scene to trigger such a response. When that child walked into the room at Barbra Streisand's house, its presence was received. Sometimes when I showed up on the scene, once all of this, the result of the fall and all of the offshoots of this fall came to life and I showed up in the scene, just my presence triggered an unsafe response. And I want to say something really quickly about showing up on the scene and having it trigger an unsafe response. There are two things that are true simultaneously. Number one, likely how you learn to behave didn't come from nothing. It's not that you imagined all of this stuff, okay? Something happened in your life that was real. You're registering it as an unsafe situation was likely also real. There are two truths, though, here. Number one, what happened was real. Number two, you began broadcasting the fall and all of the elements of the fall, the schism in your identity, your 50-cent belief attached to the symbol that you are less than broken and something is wrong with you. You began broadcasting that out. So it becomes this self-perpetuating cycle. Yes, the environment was unsafe. You broadcast out that it was because of you, that you were a bad person, a bad boy, a bad girl. You created this persona that tried to help manage and save you from this unsafe environment, and it just perpetuated all of it on itself. Safety becomes the axis around which you spin. Your goal now is to become safe, and you transmit all of this fall out to other people. So you need to write down all of the things about your environment that were unsafe and how you transmitted it. Because I want to say this really carefully. You were likely a victim of something unpleasant. Falling out of the window was not directly my fault, right? I was a kid. I mean, who knows what happened? I really, truly have no idea what happened. I have no idea what happened. All of the things that happened after that fall out of the window, the misdiagnosis, the doctors not being able to find anything wrong with me, the neurological symptoms that embedded fear within my body, my dad gifting me this proof set. He never expected that I would take it and torque it so terribly. He was just trying to teach me about the value of money, not the value of myself. If my dad knew at the time that I would attach my worth to this, he would have taken it away from me immediately. He would have taken it away from me immediately, because my father's response to me was always, you are worth more than rubies. You are God's child. You are my child. You are my daughter. But that doesn't mean that my dad or my mom was absolved from all of this stuff that was happening around us. It wasn't just happening to me, it was happening to my entire family. And the situation, because of all of these things, it was actually unsafe, right? Like the doctors not knowing what was wrong with me and not being able to help me wasn't great. That was real. But in order for me to get to the other side of being victimized by this situation, I have to take ownership of what I am projecting out into the world. And what I am projecting out into the world is I am 50 cents on the dollar. And when you project out, I am worthless, I am not worthy, I am broken, I am less than, the world is going to pick that up and run with it. Make no mistake about it. So you have to take ownership. Yes, this happened to you, but yes, you also can do something to change it, not from the persona, but from the truth of who you are. That is what's going to cure all of this. Because this idea that you have to be safe rewired your coordinates. You are out of alignment. We talked about this. We talked about getting knocked out of alignment and how when you get knocked out of alignment, it can be the littlest of things. It can be the littlest of things. But when you take that knock out of alignment and map that to 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years time, that little tick out of alignment becomes this massive gulf between who you were designed to be, who you are at the core of who you are, the truth of who you are at the core. And it took this little lie and it took that lie to its ultimate end. And sometimes when you get to the end of where that lie deposits you, you are in a life you don't even recognize. It distorted the orbit of your life, and survival now becomes the center of gravity around which you orbit. The fall sits at the axis point of that. Something is wrong with me sits at the axis of that, at the bottom, the place that anchors your identity. Your identity anchors in something is wrong with me. And your behaviors or the funk or your survival stress reactions, which we're going to talk about right now, is the thing that spins your entire world. And survival is this gravitational pull that is put into motion by all of your stress reactions. And at the very center of that distorted orbit is this sentence: I must survive at all cost. And the reason why that's a lie is it reduces your existence to bare continuation. All you got to do is survive. There's no mission, there's no abundance, there's no vision. There's just fear wiring your entire nervous system and breath in your lungs. That's all you got. You survive. But survival is not the mission. You were made for so much more. This is right here, the critical juncture of understanding how you got out of alignment with who you really are at the core. In the next episode, we're going to talk about the behaviors you created from this schism in your core and how the marriage between the fall and the funk is the blueprint of the pattern that you set up and you run over and over and over and over again. If you ever wondered why the same things happen to you, no matter the environment, no matter the relationship, this is why. I know it's tough, but hopefully it's also illuminating. Don't stop. The episode for the funk is already recorded and waiting for you. Click on it now or whenever you're ready and continue this excavation journey to your core. You're going to have to do the work, but I'm in it with you and we'll do it together.